The following video is not made for kids. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello to my subscribers, this is the TFangy coming to you with what will hopefully be a quick and successful review. This is a review on a Transformers figure that I got a couple of weeks ago from Amazon, and it's one I've been wanting to review for quite some time. So without further delay, here is the Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition Autobot Ratchet. So Ratchet is the 9th figure to be released under the Studio Series Gamer Edition banner, and the general consensus from fans and collectors is that Ratchet might now be tied, or in some collectors' minds surpass, Optimus Prime in being the greatest Gamer Edition figure that's been released so far. The Gamer Edition line has been one that's received mostly critical feedback from most Transformers collectors because the action figures haven't been the greatest, transformations haven't been, of the figures between their robot modes and alt modes, haven't been that good. But on top of everything else, the main gimmick of the Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition figures only being able to hold their weapons by swapping their right side arms out with, and then attaching the weapons onto their elbows. Even though that's reminiscent of the video games, it's a feature that a lot of collectors feel is one that isn't necessary. But taking a look here at Ratchet himself, there he is inside the box. There's some artwork of him in robot mode. You got him on the same side of the box here. You got the same image here on this side of the box. So you got the Studio Series Gamer Edition logo here on the top. There's the title of the game, War for Cybertron. Go around here to the back, you've got Ratchet in his robot mode and in his alt mode of a Cybertronian ambulance. He transforms back and forth between both modes in 28 steps, and Ratchet's one-sentence bio reads, Ratchet activates the planetary blasters to take down the Decepticon forces. So yeah, because the Transformers are constantly involved in a civil war, doctors are always needed on both sides. Alright, and so Ratchet has become the most prominent Transformers character who is a doctor and medical figure for Optimus Prime and the Autobots. In more recent years, there have been more Transformers characters that have joined Ratchet in having ambulances for vehicle modes, and so if you want to have fun, and you could joke that the Autobots do have a decent-sized medical corps, with Ratchet being the most prominent leader and member of them. But even out here inside the box, one thing that I did notice when Gamer Edition Ratchet was announced, there was something about him that I wasn't sure, but it made him look different from other action figures of Ratchet that I have in my Transformers collection, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was until I finally noticed an image on the internet, and when I finally realized, even here inside the box you can see it now. One thing that makes the Studio Series Gamer Edition Ratchet figure unique compared to other Ratchet figures is the paint job on Ratchet's head sculpt. It's almost entirely red. His helmet is almost entirely red with a white head crest on it, and that is the type of color scheme that Generation 1 Ratchet had in the Transformers comic books, where he had a red helmet with a white head crest after Marvel and Sunbow Productions designed a head sculpt for Ratchet, since his Generation 1 action figure didn't actually come with a head. In the Transformers G1 cartoon by Sunbow Productions, Ratchet's helmet was white, and his head crest was actually black or charcoal gray, if you will. But in the comic books, the G1 comic books published by Marvel made Ratchet's helmet red, and then his head crest was done white. So it was almost like an inverted paint job that Ratchet's helmet had in the cartoon versus the comic books. And so to see the Gamer Edition Ratchet figure come with the G1 Marvel comic book head paint job of a red helmet with white head crest, that's a unique look that Ratchet has had very rarely. Almost every action figure and iteration of Ratchet that exists in Transformers fiction, with the exception of the live-action Transformers movies, has followed Ratchet's appearance in the G1 cartoon, where they have where Ratchet's helmet is white, his head is white, and then he has a black V crest on his forehead. So that is definitely a unique look for the Gamer Edition Ratchet figure, to have the paint job from the G1 Marvel comics. So I just wanted to point that out with you guys. Is that if Ratchet looks slightly different for you, then visually it's probably because you're not used to seeing Ratchet with a head sculpt that, if you want to joke about it, looks somewhat similar to Ironhide, where his helmet is red instead of white. Right? So, without further delay, let's get Gamer Edition Ratchet out of the box and take a close look at him in robot mode. Alright, and so here is Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition Ratchet out of his box and in his robot mode, and I gotta say, I'm really impressed with the proportions here. Even though he does have a lot of kibble hanging off of him and his backpack, and also the back of his lower legs, it's not like it was with Barricade or the Decepticon soldiers, where it was an enormous backpack. And as far as I can tell, he doesn't have any hindrances. All of his joints are free to move around without any restriction, unlike Gamer Edition Megatron, where he had those spikes on the back of his knees preventing knee articulation from being activated. But yeah, it's really nice to have Ratchet in hand. I'm glad that they went and made him Voyager class size instead of Deluxe class size, because I've always felt that Ironhide and Ratchet were slightly larger than most of the other average-sized Autobots, yet still were slightly smaller than Optimus Prime. One nice thing about Ratchet is I believe he's the first ever Gamer Edition action figure where the blaster that he comes with has a 5mm peg sculpted onto the surface of it, so he can also hold it in one of his hands, and in addition to the gimmick from the video games where his right side arm can detach and the weapon can look as though it's been deployed out of his arm, and his arm has transformed into the weapon. That's what the Transformers characters did exclusively in the Transformers video games by High Moon Studios, is that their right side arms would transform into their blasters, which is why almost all of the Gamer Edition action figures that have been released so far have had the gimmick of having to swap the right side arm out in order for them to hold their laser guns. And then while it is accurate to the video games, most Transformers fans and collectors have said that they hated that you can only have the blasters, they can only wield their laser gun weapons by having the arm detached and inserting it into the elbow. So for Ratchet to finally have his being able to actually hold his laser gun in his hand, that's and hopefully future Gamer Edition action figures that get released by Hasbro and Takara Tomy will follow that practice of having being able to also hold the blaster in hand instead of just detaching the arm off. Ratchet's other weapon is an axe. Unlike Optimus Prime, where it's slightly smaller. The handle does detach from the blade of the axe, so Ratchet can hold it on the middle of the staff. He doesn't have an opening hand, and if you wanted to, you could insert the staff of the blade of the axe into Ratchet's arm, if you desire. So Ratchet can swap out his right side arm for both the blaster and the axe if you want, but it is, again, a nice breath of fresh air for Ratchet to be able to actually hold both of his weapons without his arm having to be detached from it. As far as paint apps goes, again, Ratchet has the mostly red helmet with the white head crest, which makes his head look more like his appearance in the G1 Marvel comics. So that's something you don't see that often. So it does give Gamer Edition Ratchet a unique look with his head having the paint job that it had in the comic books. He's got an Autobot logo here on his chest. He's got the heart monitor logos on his both of his shoulders, which the heart monitor logos, that was a feature that started with the Transformers animated version of Ratchet back in 2008, and it's become a feature that's almost universally found on most action figures of him. He's also got the heart monitors on his the outside of his wrists, and Ratchet's hands are, in case you were wondering, they are red plastic. So the outside of the wrist with the heart monitor, that is white paint aimed on red plastic, so just be mindful of that. He's got another Autobot logo here on his back. It's upside down since it ends up on the front of his vehicle mode. As far as I can tell, half of Ratchet's parts are red plastic and the other half are white. Some parts are paint, such as the red here on his kneecaps. That's red paint. The red here on the inside of Ratchet's legs, that's red paint as well. Same thing with the red on his on the lower half area of his abdomen. And same thing with the red used on the parts that form Ratchet's backpack. That's all red paint there as well. Now the parts that are red plastic are his robot mode hands. His robot mode head is red plastic as well. So Ratchet's face and the head crest are white paint. So just be mindful of that. If the paint were to chip off, Ratchet would be have a red head in robot mode, and he would look more like Ironhide than Ratchet. The hinges that hold his shoulder pads in place, those are made of red plastic. The lower legs the outside of the lower legs are made out of red plastic, and then pretty much the rest of Ratchet is made out of white plastic. The parts of him that are charcoal gray are the tires for his vehicle mode, the blade of the axe, the main body of the laser gun, and the interior of Ratchet's robot mode torso. That is charcoal gray plastic as well. Also, all in all, Ratchet is a pretty fantastic looking Transformers action figure. For articulation, the head is on a ball joint, so it can look up and down just a tiny amount. But due to the way the head is shaped, and also with Ratchet's backpack being close proximity to the back, the head articulation is somewhat hindered. The head has the potential to spin 360 degrees, clockwise and counterclockwise. If you can move the shoulder pads out of the way, Ratchet's arms have the potential to spin 360 degrees clockwise and counterclockwise at the shoulder. You do have to move the shoulder pads out of the way, unfortunately, so that's the only major gripe to be had with Ratchet, is the shoulder pads hinder the articulation of his upper arms. Swivel joint at the bicep, hinged elbows, wrist swivels so the hands can spin 360 degrees left and right. Waist swivel, but fresh out of the box, it's really tight on Ratchet, so just be careful of the swivel joint in his waist. But Ratchet can spin 360 degrees clockwise and counterclockwise at the waist. Universal jointed legs, so the legs can go forward this far, even with holding the axe in one of his arms. Ratchet can still kick pretty far forward, and even though he does have all the kibble here on the back of him, the leg can go back pretty far, even with the back of the leg hitting Ratchet's backpack. So pretty decent amount of leg articulation, even with all the kibble. Swivel joint in the thigh, right above the knee, hinge knees, and then there are ankle rockers here on the back of Ratchet's feet, but due to the shape of the leg, the feet articulation is somewhat limited, but I can easily overlook that. So I can kind of see why collectors have been saying Ratchet is arguably the best of the Gamer Edition figures now, because his articulation in robot mode isn't hindered by the kibble, and he can actually hold both of his weapons in his hands without detaching the arm. And so yeah, overall I have to agree with what everyone has been saying, and Ratchet might now hold the title of being the best Gamer Edition Transformers action figure that has been released to date. And now for some special size comparisons in robot mode. Here is Transformers Gamer Edition Ratchet next to some other Ratchet action figures, which the one feature they all have in common is that they're versions of Ratchet that have a Cybertronian alt mode, so they transform into Cybertronian ambulances instead of Earth-based ones. So for a size comparison, here is Gamer Edition Ratchet next to the Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy Siege Ratchet, which was released back in 2019 exclusively at Walgreens stores, and the Studio Series Bumblebee movie Ratchet figure that was released at mass retail a few years ago. So here's a funny story. I actually bought the Gamer Edition Ratchet and Ironhide figures thinking that we were never going to get Ironhide and Ratchet in the Transformers Gamer Edition line, so Hasbro really shocked me when literally about 1 week after I decided to get the Bumblebee movie Studio Series Ratchet and Ironhide figures, they announced Gamer Edition Ratchet being released in the Studio Series line. And so that took me by surprise, but even having the Bumblebee movie Ratchet action figure in my collection, I don't regret getting this figure, and I don't regret also getting Gamer Edition Ratchet. So here he is next to some other Cybertron Autobot Ratchet figures, and even though he is Voyager class, as compared to the Studio Series Bumblebee movie and Siege Ratchet action figures, in Robot Mode, Gamer Edition Ratchet, even though he's a Voyager class figure, he is the same height as Siege Ratchet, depending on how you have the legs positioned, but he is slightly bulkier due to the kibble from his vehicle mode, where it ends up in his Robot Mode. But yes, unfortunately, bringing Siege Ratchet in compared to these two Studio Series versions of Ratchet, this is an example of how over the past 5 years, from 2019 to 2024, Transformers action figures have been downsized, and so an average size Voyager class Transformers figure right now in the year of 2024 is when I'm filming this, compared to 5 years earlier in 2019. An average size Voyager class figure is the same size as an average deluxe class figure from 5 years previously, so some Transformers fans and collectors have been wondering just how far is Hasbro willing to downsize Transformers action figures, and so unfortunately comparing Siege Ratchet with Gamer Edition Ratchet is an example of that. Bumblebee Movie Ratchet is the shortest of the three of them, but overall I really enjoy each take on Ratchet, since these are different versions of him from different Transformers continuities. You got the Bumblebee movie, you've got the War for Cybertron video game, and the E1 series. But yeah, there's a comparison of the Marvel comic book helmet versus the G1 cartoon helmet there, so that's why Gamer Edition Ratchet has somewhat of a unique look in Robot Mode. So it's getting late, my mind is starting to fail me, and I'm starting to babble on longer than I wanted, so without further delay, let's hurry up and get Gamer Edition Ratchet transformed into his alt mode and wrap up the review. Alright, and so here is Gamer Edition Ratchet transformed into his alt mode of a Cybertronian ambulance, and the transformation can be a little finicky during the last few steps, partially because the way the Ratchet's robot mode legs transform into the entire back half of his vehicle mode. There's, I believe, maybe 6, maybe 7 or 8 sets of tabs that you have to clip together and line up properly to get it all into place. And before you can get all the tabs to line up properly, it feels like you're not going to be able to successfully transform Ratchet. But once you have all the panels and clips locked in place and lined up properly, it can be results in a very cohesive and alt mode for Ratchet, and it doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart easily. On my copy of Ratchet, unfortunately on this side, this one panel doesn't want to sit flush like it does here on the other side. So just be mindful of that, but overall the transformation is pretty great. And while it is a bit of a challenge, I really do enjoy Ratchet's vehicle mode. It is a very nice Voyager class sized Cybertronian ambulance, and it does follow the designs of the video games from High Moon Studios really greatly. The amount of retooling that's going to be done to distinguish the Ironhide version of this mold from Ratchet is uncertain at this point. So far we've only gotten one still image of Gamer Edition Ironhide in robot mode, but no actual official product photos of the upcoming action figure. It's unknown what time of next year in 2025 the Gamer Edition Ironhide figure will be released, if it will be released during the second or third quarter, which basically means either Gamer Edition Ironhide will be released sometime either between April and May of next year in 2025, or sometime between July and August, but hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later, because the general consensus amongst Transformers fans and collectors is that Ratchet now holds the title of being the best Studio Series Gamer Edition action figure that's been released, so there's a lot of high hopes and expectations that Ironhide will be equally as impressive once this figure gets repainted and retooled into him. Every G1 styled Ratchet action figure I have in my Transformers collection, I looked around before I started recording this review for Gamer Edition Ratchet, but every action figure of Ratchet that's inspired by Generation 1 Ratchet, it has ended up being mold mates with Ironhide, with an action figure of Ironhide. Most oftentimes, Ironhide is the first character to have an action figure designed, but sometimes, like with the Gamer Edition figure of Ratchet, Ratchet will sometimes be given an action figure first, and then he'll be repainted and retooled into Ironhide. So it's a trend that hasn't stopped. That won't stop with Gamer Edition Ratchet, where he ends up being mold mates with Ironhide. So that's really nice to see that happen. As far as weapon storage goes, on the instruction sheets and on the photos on Ratchet's box, you're supposed to just, for weapon storage, just plug the axe on top of the roof and then have the laser gun sitting here off the back of the alt mode. Unfortunately, there isn't any better proper weapon storage for Ratchet's equipment. If you wanted to, you could plug the laser gun here on the front of the axe blade, and then but then unfortunately there's no real spot to put the blade for the axe unless you insert it here on the back, or you insert it on the top. But these weapon storages look even more ridiculous than the previous ones, so unfortunately this is the best that weapon storage that Hasbro and Takara Tomy could do. I kind of wish they would have designed a better spot to plug Ratchet's laser gun weapon on it. You can plug it facing two directions. You can either having it facing upside down and pointed this way, or you can have it facing right side up and pointing this way. It doesn't really matter which way. Either way, it's not the greatest weapon storage, but at least it's there. And one feature I didn't point out with Ratchet's laser gun is that the white tri-prong tip, it can rotate and spin around. And so that's another nice feature that he has. But yeah, with all his weapons attached, here is Gamer Edition Ratchet transformed into his alt mode of a Cybertronian ambulance, and it does look like he's over weaponized or armored up, but considering the war zone that the Transformers are fighting, the war that the Transformers are fighting, and the amount of times Ratchet is actually actively involved in a war zone, it would make perfect sense for him to be armored up, not so much for combat, but for defense, and for himself. But yeah, overall, a pretty great looking Cybertronian ambulance. He's got the windshield and side windows painted charcoal gray. You got the Autobot logo there on the front bumper. The wheels do spin really easily, and one nice thing about Gamer Edition Ratchet is that the wheels are pinned on, they are not clipped on, so that's a nice return to see pinned on wheels instead of clipped on wheels. In my opinion, pinned on wheels increase the longevity of Transformers action figures versus ones that are just clipped on. And so hopefully future Transformers action figures, this will see the return of pinned wheels instead of clipped on wheels there. Even though Ratchet's wheels do spin around, because of the low clearance here with his robot mode feet, and the leg panels here on the bottom of his vehicle mode, Ratchet is not going to be off-roading anytime soon, so he can only spin around on flat surfaces. And once again, really fast for some size comparisons, here is the Studio Series Gamer Edition Ratchet next to the Transformers War for Cybertron Trilogy Siege Ratchet, and also the Bumblebee Movie Studio Series Ratchet. So here they are, and are all lined up to each other, and these are the three Cybertronian Ratchet action figures that I have in my Transformers collection. And as you can see, my tray is angled down slightly to the back. I had no idea, but yeah, there, as you can see, is a demonstration of how successfully Ratchet is able to roll around and when he's transformed into his alt mode. So yeah, all in all, a pretty impressive Cybertronian alt mode Ratchet figure. So I keep repeating myself. So just to say things off, I do enjoy how, unlike other action figures of Ratchet, where he's mostly white with some red striping, which is reminiscent of his G1 action figure, I do enjoy how the distribution of red and white parts here on Ratchet when he's in his ambulance mode. He does bear a lot of resemblances to the Transformers Animated and the Transformers Prime versions of Ratchet. More so Transformers Animated than Transformers Prime, which is somewhat funny if you know the fact that starting in the year 2010, when the War for Cybertron video game was released, and then continuing on with the Transformers Prime cartoon series, what Hasbro tried to do across an 8-year time span from 2010 to 2018 is they tried to make every Transformers cartoon, video game, and comic book story all part of the same reality, part of the same universe, and it ended up being called the Aligned Continuity, and it was basically Hasbro's way of having a single, coherent Transformers series spread across every branch of the Transformers franchise, the video games, the comic books, the TV shows, and even the films to a point. Right, so this version of Ratchet here in the Aligned Continuity is technically the exact same version of Ratchet that's seen in the Transformers Prime cartoon show. So, the Aligned Continuity, while it was an ambitious idea, when the time came for it to put it into practical use, Transformers fans and collectors couldn't overlook the inconsistencies in the stories of the Transformers comic books and the cartoon shows, even the video games, where Transformers characters would arrive on Earth for the first time at different intervals, or certain characters would arrive on Earth for the first time than other characters would. And so, while the Aligned Continuity was an ambitious attempt on Hasbro to have the Transformers franchise have be united under a single storyline, the inconsistencies proved to be too great to try and do it further. And so, in 2018, when IDW just announced that they were going to finally stop their ongoing Transformers comic book stories and they were going to end the comic books, the Aligned Continuity came to an abrupt end in 2018. And so Hasbro has accepted the idea of having multiple series, not in multiple realities and multiple Transformers stories, not tied up to each other and taking part in separate continuities. But yeah, I've babbled on long enough, so here one last time is Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition Ratchet. And to end the review for the proverbial question, do I recommend getting this figure and adding it to your Transformers collection? Absolutely. As a standalone action figure of Ratchet, this is definitely a Ratchet action figure that is a pretty incredible looking Transformers action figure in its own right, and is capable of standing in on its own merits. And even if you don't like the designs of the Transformers video games from High Moon Studios, this is still a pretty impressive looking action figure of Ratchet. It's Voyager class sized, and Voyager class sized action figures of Ratchet that are inspired by Generation 1 Ratchet are very rare. Almost every action figure of Ratchet that I have in my collection that's inspired by G1 Ratchet is Deluxe class sized. While the weapon storage in alt mode is not that great, Ratchet is the first Gamer Edition figure that can actually hold both of his weapons in robot mode, thanks to his laser gun actually having a 5mm peg that allows him to hold it in his hand. And the axe weapon is actually pretty great looking. It's not as enormous as Gamer Edition Optimus Prime, but I think that actually works to its own advantage in robot mode. It's not enormous enough that Ratchet would have difficulty holding it. And despite the kibble from his alt mode forming his backpack and the backside of his legs, so the articulation isn't hindered too badly. And so overall, I agree with what other collectors have said, that Ratchet might arguably be the best figure of the Studio Series Gamer Edition line so far. And when this figure does get repainted and retooled into Ironhide, I will definitely also buy the Ironhide version of this mold as well. So I cannot stress enough how much I highly recommend getting the Studio Series Gamer Edition Ratchet figure and adding it to your Transformers collection. So thank you guys all so much. This has been the TFan Geek, and until next time, you guys, please remember to stay safe, stay healthy, and until next time, transform and roll out. Goodbye, everyone.